Listen, picture a steel thread running across a continent. It isn't silk anymore, but it does the same job. It links factories and warehouses in China with shops and homes across Europe. For many kinds of goods, electronics, car parts, and the millions of smaller parcels that fill online orders. The China-Europe rail corridor is the reason a product ordered this month can appear on a shelf or at a door in just a couple of weeks. That corridor runs through a handful of key choke points. One of the most important of them sits in a small Polish town called Małaszewicze. For years, that village has quietly handled the bulk of China-Europe trains. It's become the gateway everyone relies on. So when Poland announced a sudden closure of border crossings with Belarus during large military exercises and regional security incidents in September, the effect was immediate and sharp. Trains stopped. Containers piled up. Logistics hubs paused. In the first few days, more than 100 trains were reported stuck at the border, and operators warned that clearing the backlog would take days, if not longer. For companies that count on a dependable 2-week land transit, the pause meant rerouting, air freight surges, and worried customers. The economic value that travels along this route is not trivial, on the order of tens of billions of euros a year, so a short break in flow is felt widely. Now, quick favor. If you're finding this useful so far, tap like and share this video with one colleague or friend who watches global trade stories. It really helps. Let me walk you through why this mattered, what happened after, and why the episode tells us something important about trade in the age of geopolitics. At heart, the closure was sold by Warsaw as a security step. Military drills nearby, concerns about airspace violations, and regional tension pushed the government to temporarily close crossings. But the swift economic repercussions meant politics ran up against practical realities. Freight firms, hauliers, and logistics operators pushed back. Warehouses had to rearrange schedules, shippers faced rising short-term costs, and some exporters looked immediately to air or sea alternatives, both costlier and slower or less reliable depending on the product. During the shutdown, the picture on the ground was stark. Whole trains sitting idle, crew and paperwork complications at transshipment points, and what looks like a domino effect through the logistics chain. The human side matters too. Drivers, terminal workers, and small Polish firms that provide lift-on, lift-off services felt the disruption in their day-to-day business. That mix of geopolitics colliding with everyday supply chain realities is precisely what makes these episodes more than a news brief. They ripple out to ordinary business and household choices. And that's why the reopening, when it came, was not just an administrative note, it was a practical relief valve. After border crossings were allowed to resume, the immediate priority became clearing the backlog and restoring throughput. But here's the key takeaway. Reopening did not erase the lesson. Disruptions, even short ones, accelerate change. Freight planners start looking for redundancy. Shippers run contingency scenarios they hadn't prioritized before. So what did China and the logistics world do while the gates were closed? Two things happened fast: diplomacy and diversification. On the diplomacy side, governments and companies kept frantic phone lines open. Negotiations, assurances, and technical talks between rail operators sought to untangle paperwork and security checks so that trains could move again once crossings reopened. On the diversification side, and this is where the big structural shift shows up, shippers moved to alternatives already in development. The so-called middle corridor across the Caspian and through the Caucasus, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey, is now being treated not as a niche route but as a real alternative that can absorb more volume if needed. At the same time, maritime operators and Chinese firms tested the Northern Sea route across the Arctic. Experimental container sailings escorted by icebreakers have shown that, under the right seasonal conditions, a ship can link Chinese ports and northwestern Europe in far less time than the old Suez lane. Reports cited journeys on some express Arctic links in the ballpark of about 18 days. These voyages aren't yet a silver bullet. They depend on weather, capacity, and political cooperation. But they're real options that didn't exist at scale a decade ago. There's also a big infrastructure play in Central Asia. New rail projects like the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan line are being built precisely to create more routes that don't have to pass through any one choke point. Construction of that southern rail corridor accelerated in recent years, and planners project it will add genuine capacity into the system over the coming 5 to 10 years. Again, not an overnight fix, but an important medium-term hedge. At the end of the day, two forces are in tension here: the tactical, short-term security choices a sovereign nation will make when it perceives risk, and the economic momentum of supply chains that demand predictability. On this occasion, economic pressure clearly mattered. Polish business groups and logistics stakeholders made it plain that keeping the border shut for long would damage domestic firms and regional commerce. That political reality helps explain why a temporary closure was followed by a reopening once authorities assessed the security situation and weighed the economic costs. Now, let me be clear about the larger point. This episode is not an isolated blip. It's an example of how interdependent infrastructure has become and how brittle that interdependence can be in the face of politics. Europe and Asia have built a web of trade links that are faster and more efficient than ever. But when a single segment is interrupted, a border crossing, a port, a customs corridor, the consequences cascade quickly. That's why we're watching a real strategy shift: building redundancies, investing in alternate corridors, and strengthening diplomatic channels to keep commerce flowing even when security concerns flare. Before I wrap up, and please do leave a comment, what do you think is the best long-term strategy for Europe and China? Diversify routes aggressively, or double down on protecting existing choke points? I'd love to hear your view. To close, Poland's short closure of the Belarus crossings exposed a simple truth about modern trade: geopolitics and logistics are inseparable now. The Rail Silk Road remains vital. Małaszewicze still matters. But the shock rippled through the market and sped up investments in alternatives that were already on the table. Expect policymakers on both sides to juggle security postures and economic pressures more carefully in future. Because once trade grinds, the costs are felt by everyday businesses and consumers. If this breakdown helped you understand the issue, please like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the follow-ups when I cover how these alternate routes perform in the months ahead. Thanks very much for watching.